Good afternoon. I'm Michelle Goodrum of the Turning of Generations blog, and I'm here with CeCe Moore of the DNA Detectives. How are you this afternoon,
Great.
CeCe?
How are you,
I'm
Michelle?
doing great. You have done so much for the genealogy community with all of your work with the institutes and online courses and public speaking. I
Thank
just
you.
have a couple of questions that I'd like to get from you, a couple of tips for our genealogy researchers to help them successfully implement DNA testing with their research.
Okay.
The first one, you've obviously had a lot of experience with running across new DNA matches, and sometimes they respond when you contact them, and sometimes they don't. Do you
Yes.
have any tips for maybe enticing these matches to respond back, and how do you handle those situations?
Well, that's a really good question, and it's a really challenging one. I mean, as we know, the majority of our matches probably don't respond. I usually try to keep it light in the first message. I do not do a big, long email or message telling them all about my family tree because people's eyes glaze over at that.
Hmm.
And we are dealing with more and more non genealogists that are taking DNA tests. So you want to try to just be very casual, friendly, and see if you can get a response. And then if you've got them engaged, it's easier then to delve into the genealogy part of it. But I think most important is that I really don't need to have most of them respond. So I'm able to, if they have a tree, that's all I need. And if they don't have a tree, the majority of the time I'm able to build one for them. And even if they have a username, oftentimes I can identify who that person is. And so I don't even need to have their response. And I really prefer that. I mean, it's much easier to just to be able to dive in and do the research.
Well, and that's good to hear because so many matches don't respond, and I
Yeah.
think we're getting more and more of that because so many non-genealogists are taking DNA tests.
Yeah, and I think when you request something, just keep it simple. Ask for their
Okay.
grandparents' names, perhaps. Because if you can get back to 1940 or before, you can just build that
Well,
tree
that's a
out.
really good
So
tip.
yeah, that's the main thing that I ask for. I don't usually ask them for parents because I don't want it to seem too invasive. But at the grandparent or great grandparent level, it's more removed and I think less threatening to most people.
Okay, good. Now, there's another kind of dicey situation I think we're seeing more and more of because so many people are taking DNA tests
Mhm.
that there are surprising results that are coming back, non-paternity matches.
Mhm.
How, what are some suggestions that you can give our audience for how to handle talking to the tester about this surprise or talking to some of the other parties that are involved?
You know, it's a really challenging question, and it's one we are having to face increasingly. I think there's a couple of things to keep in mind. One is that we're not counselors and we're not therapists, and so we shouldn't be trying to take the place of those people. If somebody discovers something through their DNA testing that is upsetting to them, really the best advice that we can give them is that they should speak to a therapist or they should speak to their family, close friends, clergy, whoever it is that they feel comfortable speaking with. I've really tried to draw that line there so we're not overstepping our boundaries as genealogists. With that said, what I try to do is prepare people before that happens. And I think that's important. I used to just want everyone to DNA test, and I'm certainly one of the biggest promoters of that. But I've reached the point in experience that I realize we need to warn people up front. So this is something that they should be advised up before testing rather than after the fact. So if this is someone that we're testing, someone in our family, someone we're asking to test, we do need to advise them that it's possible they will learn something unexpected about their family. They might even find an unknown close relative. So then, in the event it happens, at least we've already laid that groundwork. And sometimes that will mean losing a tester, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I think it's safer for our industry and for us as a whole to make sure that those people who aren't ready to test, who aren't ready to find family surprises and unravel mysteries they might not have known existed, maybe shouldn't be testing yet. Those are the ones who
Yeah.
maybe should wait and make sure that it's something that they're really comfortable with.
That they're
So
prepared to deal
hopefully,
with.
yeah, I mean, hopefully the more we get the word out about that and educate the community, the less we'll have to try to do cleanup after the fact and deal with someone who's really
Yeah,
upset.
yeah.
But on the other hand, everyone thinks it won't happen to me. So even when you do warn them, sometimes they're very surprised when it happens. I don't have a perfect answer for it, but I just think that we need to be careful, both on the front end and on the back end, and make sure that people are getting any help that they might need that we are not able to provide.
Oh, thank you for that tip. You've worked on so many fascinating cases. I've watched them on Finding Your Roots and some of the other TV shows. Do you have one or maybe even two favorite cases that you can talk about briefly?
Boy, that's a tough one. If you saw Finding Your Roots last season, which I think they're rerunning right now, you might have seen the LL Cool J
Oh, yes.
one. Well, the thing that happens on the show is they can only show about 20 to 30 minutes of this long interview that the celebrity sits through. So they sit through maybe 3.5, 4 hours of learning about their family history and our research. And we spend hundreds of hours collectively, myself and Johnny Cerny's traditional genealogy team. And so there was a lot about that case that didn't make it to the air. They showed the easy part, which was finding his mother's father, biological father. We found that through a first cousin. The much more challenging part was finding her mother. And I had to do that through 2 second cousins once removed. But one of them had an unknown father case. I had to solve that before I could use her to solve the unknown grandmother's, maternal grandmother's side. So I think that's one of my favorites. I really had to do a lot of deep research. I researched all the way back into slavery in
Oh, my
Virginia, in
goodness.
Brunswick County, Virginia, and then had to use land records and discover who the heirs were in order to finalize this case. So it was a really good example of using the paper trail, the genealogical traditional records, in conjunction with the DNA. And there was just no time to show that on air. I also got to sit down with him and do the reveal that Dr. Gates usually does and show him that part of the research and how we found her. So that's probably one, in that it was a real comprehensive case. And then, my foundling cases are always pretty incredible.
Yeah, sure.
I have a recent one where 3 babies were all found abandoned within about a mile radius over a few years, but it's not the one that was on 2020. It's another case like that.
Okay.
And what's fascinating is we assumed they were all siblings. They all had a shared mother. And we just discovered that only 2 of them do. And the youngest one must have been like a copycat case and is
Oh.
not related to the others. So that was quite a shock.
My goodness. Well, thank you for sharing your tips and your exciting cases with us. I really enjoyed the LL Cool J episode
Oh, I'm
myself.
glad. I wish
And
everyone could see the whole process.
yes, because that's what we really all need to be doing is incorporating traditional genealogical research with the DNA to solve our cases. Thank you very much, CeCe.
Thanks so much for having me, Michelle.